Hey everyone, it's Pat from Dime Cabaret here. In this video, I'm going to go over, some of the differences between the 2023 version that we've recently released of Volta and the 2020 version, the original demo I first listened to actually. And I guess the changes we made going from that 2020 version to the 2023 version. So one of the first things I remember when starting this new arrangement was what Brandon disliked about the original. And I guess all I really remember him saying is he just wanted it less heavy, I guess. And to me personally, I'm like, well, what does less heavy mean? And I guess we kind of settled on less guitar heavy. We both realized, well, actually it needs a certain level of heaviness, like emotional heaviness, to really illustrate the juxtaposition between, the simplicity of life before, a destructive war happens, and also a burned down cabaret. Spoilers if you haven't read the novel. Anyway, so we really wanted to highlight this nice kind of innocent, precious moment of beauty, and also introduce a little bit of chaos. And that's kind of really it. I guess we wanted to capture a calm before the storm with this new version. Not that the original didn't, but just kind of emphasize that aspect a bit more. This video is kind of going to be split into two, actually. The second part will be dealing a bit more with just my general arranging process, as well as, specific examples for the strings and piano in Autumn. I guess the rest of this video is just going to be kind of about the guitar parts. Well, yeah, so we wanted to be less guitar heavy. That was one of the things initially that we needed to talk about. And I guess trying to navigate how to write, like what to do with this. I had to keep in mind when I was writing the guitar parts is like, how do we make this less guitar heavy? Considering I tend to write quite a lot. And so with this new version in the guitar parts, so I guess the main difference we made for the guitar heavy bits is, or to make it less guitar heavy, is we still had those sustained chords, as I just mentioned, but they've got a bit more of a cleaner sound to them. They're a bit lower in the mix, so you don't necessarily hear them up front like the original. And that's really just to, it does kind of come back at the second half of the second chorus, but it's, it was really sort of just trying to hold it back a little bit more, so the bridge and then the consequent instrumental solo, it's to give that instrumental solo bit a bit more of a punch, because that's what's kind of like all sort of, at least to me, feels like it's leading up to, and then you have the final chorus afterwards. Before I'd started writing the piano and strings parts properly, I had this for the choruses for Autumn, and you might recognize it if you'd watched some of our earliest live shows. I used to play this. Now I kind of only just play the solo and some sustained chords, which made it into the final version. But here's how the part sounded. So that's I'm not going to play the whole thing, but in context, this is kind of, I should mention this, is I usually do a lot of my arranging, composition, sketching with a notation software. In this case, I think it was back when I used Dorico now. Back then when I was still using MuseScore still, which is still a great software, free if you ever want to use notation software. Highly recommend, but here's what it used to sound in context with the slimmed down version of the chorus. So that's roughly how it sounded previously. For some of these, or all these audio clips, I'm sharing with you today, they should be on the Black Dime website. If you're interested to hear how these all fully sounded and whatnot, definitely go check out the Black Dime Cabaret website, our official website. It also has a bunch of other demos from Brandon, of course. The 2020 version that I'm constantly talking about, and the 2023 version, you can listen to that on Spotify, but I think it's also on the actual website as well at the very end of all these demos, that, you know, to show the accumulation of all the hours spent. Anyway, so, you know, so originally that part was there, but then, you know, I made the executive decision of, I guess, no, technically Brandon and I both made the executive decision of going, it's cool, it sounds nice, but unfortunately we had to cut it because to make space for the piano and strings parts, because otherwise there'd just be too much noise going into those choruses. So fragments of it remain. Really, all that's happening is just arpeggiating the chords. So what I ended up doing in the studio version was pretty much just playing the chords that I was arpeggiating as just strums. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of really it for that, which is fine, totally. And this is kind of a thing about writing guitar parts for BDCs, or just in general when it comes to this stuff, is like knowing when enough is enough and not overplaying, which I can do quite a lot. The other thing I guess I can talk about in this case, well, there's two other parts that I'm playing really. One is just chords during the bridge, kind of just the standard bar chords really, so there's not much to talk about there. Then the other part is the solo, I suppose, and I guess, you know, most people would consider this a solo kind of thing. Let me play it. I said this in the studio during the mixing process, and I've talked about this with Brandon before, but as much as the guitar's doing solo-y kind of stuff, I couldn't really care less about it, in the sense of I'm also think of that part as an instrumental solo. I care more about the whole soundscape rather than just the electric guitar in that instance. I'm more interested really in the whole, how it interacts with the tremolo strings and like the piano, the drums and the bass and everything else in that. So I'm more interested just in that, to be honest. And that's kind of the approach I take with a lot of the parts I've written for BDC. There might be some cool lead lines happening here, but I really try to think about, all right, well, is it adding a certain kind of character to the overall track at that given moment that it's playing? And so I guess when it comes to writing parts for Black Dime Cabaret's music, there's kind of three camps, I guess I tend to think like of my parts as. One is that I've made it the frick up. It's kind of just original stuff that is what it is, for lack of a better way of describing it. Second one is just referencing motifs, BDC motifs that, you know, Brandon has come up with. You know, you're welcome to take a shot every single time you hear the main Enter the Black Dime Cabaret theme in my guitar parts. But, you know, there's a reason for that, because it's a motif. It makes everything feel a little bit more glued rather than those random parts, which I do have, but I feel like personally, when I'm working with this kind of stuff, it's a bit like a story, you know, referencing past songs and just also future songs. Yeah, so that's the second kind of type. The third type, it really is like kind of revising Brandon's original lead parts. Not that they're bad or anything, but I just personally would have taken a different approach to it. And I guess that's kind of what happened with this solo. I am adding some original stuff, but I took what's there and tried to put my own spin on it, I suppose. So here's how the original sounded in that same bit. with my own spin, what I tried to do, I suppose, was trying to make it, I guess with that sort of lead line, I guess I was trying to capture a sort of crazy, chaotic sound, whilst, you know, kind of destructive sound, but also still maintaining a sense of ecstatic joy, I suppose. Not being too depressing with it. That was kind of the goal with that one. So that's kind of all it for the guitar parts. Hope you found that sort of interesting to listen to, and stay tuned for the second video, which is going to be a lot more in depth about the strings and the piano and just my general arranging process. Until then, bye.